Welcome back, everyone. This is the Word Traction Podcast, Northern Massachusetts, and we have 90 today, and going to be tickling 100 for the next couple days, which is not noteworthy if at many in many parts of the country. So I will quit my pissing and moaning. I'm a Red Sox fan, and I'm the same asshole that was sitting out here on this very porch when the snow was coming down, and it was 5 degrees Fahrenheit. So New Englanders, and Red Sox fans, we have to be adaptable and flexible. If you are a young man of military age living in Russia, you really have to be adaptable because times are tough. The title of the episode is "There's No Midnight Train to Georgia," and that is true even in the best of times. There is not dependable rail service crossing the border from Russia into Georgia, but you can get there. And Georgia was popular in the news a couple 2 years ago, year and a half, as as a popular border crossing for young, predominantly men, trying to avoid being sent to the meat grinder in Ukraine. Now, the meat grinder is, as many parts of Putin's machine are under pressure, the meat grinder portion of the program is running at full speed. In fact, I expect when the final numbers are in for uh, for the month of June, that it's going to be upwards of 36,000 Russian KIA. Right? So it is when it's trending well above 1,000 a day, those are some serious numbers. And you would reasonably ask, if you weren't a nutcase buried in national security related data and stories as I am. I thought it was just machines killing machines. I thought this was drone warfare, the future of war, right? The battlefield of the next millennium, and that is true. It's just that the Ukrainians are learning those lessons a little bit faster than the Russians are. But there is time for them to catch up. Russia does have resources, and don't believe your lying ears about the imminent demise of one Vladimir Putin. The fact that he's the second richest man on the planet doesn't mean that he's going to spend his money to support the Russian war effort. But they still pump and sell oil, and they do other things. Minerals, rare earth minerals, and otherwise. And he directs where the money goes, and he has a corrupt cadre of gentlemen surrounding him. That the oligarch class, kind of like our Epstein class, and there are very many crossovers, many of the same guys that are all sad at Jeffrey's demise. Putin principle among them, because not that I know that Putin himself patronized the more grotesque services offered by Jeffrey Epstein Inc., but it was a tremendous source of information, and information is Vladimir Putin's game. He's the spy chief, as opposed to the spy sheik. That's a different guy. But he'll rally, and the thing that helps him in a way, in an inhuman way, is that he doesn't give a fuck about the costs of the war. If they come and they kill him, he will be he will have been proven wrong once, right? But until such time, he will continue to throw people into the meat grinder, as we've learned and lamented over the past year plus. He's brought in recruits from North Korea. He's brought in recruits from Africa, all over Africa, and now there are UN efforts to uh, to staunch the flow of those victims who were just taking a contract to try to feed their families. And the latest statistic from last month, this is a May statistic, is that they were calculating the amount of time once a new Russian soldier reached the battlefield, his life expectancy was measured in terms of parts of an hour, you know, 20, 30, 40 minutes. Right? Because when you put soldiers on the field, drones can find them and kill them. Right? And that's happening at a faster clip. Yes, there are more effective ways of jamming certain drone systems, and that's also why you see so many of those pictures with the the wires, the cables, the fiber optic cables strewn through trees across Ukraine, is because one way to beat the jammers is to use the direct connection, kind of like hardwiring it, where you're steering the plane into it, the drone into its target with fiber optic cable attached. At least most of the ride. But these are all these are adjustments that, as we talked about, Ukraine is making more quickly on the fly than Russia is, and Ukraine is innovating and putting those innovations into action much more quickly. But that doesn't mean that Putin's standing still. And he has a test kitchen, which is something that Ukraine has. They have their own battlefield conditions, and they're learning plenty. But remember, excuse me, that Vladimir also has his Iranian test kitchen, because he has a business relationship with the Iranian regime as well, just as he is exerting influence on the principal resident of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. He is also exerting influence on the Iranian regime, and he's selling them tech. Sometimes he's selling them last year's tech or the year before. He's selling them missile defense capabilities that don't seem to be able to intercept missiles. And he's like he's a walking arms bazaar. He's buying from X to sell to Y, taking the best of the technology that he can for himself, putting it into the lab, trying to replicate it and resell that to someone else, avoiding prying eyes of satellites as best he can, and moving on to fight another day. But the real desperate part, for desperate more for the soldiers, but also for Putin, because he likes to win. He likes backing a winner, and he preferred that winner is he himself, right? That where is he going to, in the interim, while they bridge the gap between the modern warfare of more drones, more drone interceptors, and and the next gen missiles that he's supposedly getting resupplied with, some actually from China, which is a little bit frightening, because they're most of what he was rumored to have purchased from China recently is for longer range targets than he would need for all but the furthest west reaches of Ukraine. And that means that our ally and NATO member, say, Poland, could be under the gun, because if he sells, buys and sells, and utilizes chaos better than anybody else on the battlefield, because he's been practicing longer and he's smarter. Putin is. So is he going to, as many people have, uh, you know, drawn out hypothetical war plans and said, well, this may be the time that Putin, like the rat that he has often used the tale of when he was a young man, when he observed a rat being cornered in a room, that the rat turned around and tried to attack, because when he is cornered, he has no other way but to attack, and it's an analogy, it's a lesson, it's a parable that he has often used over his many years in leadership, and it's quoted quite frequently. I'm actually in the middle of another Putin biography right now. I will once I finish it, and I'm gonna write a review. It's been fantastic. 65% way. It's long. As I said, I gave you a page count. I don't know anything about page counts because I'm only capable of consuming books like that on audio format. But it's a 20-hour uh, marathon of birth to to, uh, to current times, or at least until the early 2020s. And anyways, I'll share a review on that tome when it's completed, because I don't want to, no spoilers, of course, but I want to make sure that it delivers all the way through before I give it the stamp of approval, because there are plenty of good Putin or Putin adjacent books out there, and I've got two more that are on my list for the summer, and I'll something I've been meaning to do is I consume a lot of written material in audiobook format, and I intend to do little write-ups, because as a good customer, and as a good member of the world that creates content, it's the least you could do, right? I mean, if I enjoy a book, then I should elevate the author on Substack, on X, on the site where I purchased the book, which is what I use now because of the stain of Jeff Bezos on all things Amazon. Is The platform is called Creatively Audiobooks, or at least that's what it says on. Yeah. In any case, you'll more on that in the not too distant future. But the desperate play that's going on right now is Putin's looking at it and saying, by the numbers, I have a 4 million man, could be in women too, a 4 million person reserve in Russia, which far surpasses what is available in Ukraine, which is a much smaller country geographically and population wise. Is the 4 million, is that number like rock steady? Probably not, because it's Putin, right? Like I've got, like Donald Trump. I've got 1 trillion men that are trained in my army reserve, just because everything's 1 trillion to him. But even at half that, he has substantially more reserves available to him than does Mr. Zelensky across the way. After after such a long and devastating war, understandably, the attrition rate, the attrition rate, meaning people not wanting to serve, not wanting to fulfill their obligations as reservists, is spiking. Recruiting is very difficult in Russia now. That statistic that I quoted about May, you know, if the deaths are 1,100 a day, right? If there are and if your estimated the remainder of your life is measured on a hourglass or less, then you may be thinking about other things. You're a parent, you're a loving spouse. There's still some of those out there, I heard, and you love your kids and you want to be part of your community. When you look at those statistics, you say, "Oh, why don't I just kill my?" I'm just making light of a horrible subject, but it says that your likelihood of surviving this is low and diminished. So what do you do? It's kind of the flip side of the United States. Trump and Vance are trying to keep everybody out, except for white South Africans, of course. Putin's trying to keep everybody in, and he has a new kind of his version of Palantir is a new tracking system that integrates all of the military reserves, who's been called up, who hasn't yet, stressing the yet, and who has been granted permission to travel, and tying in all of the airports and their immigration status. Popular places to travel. I mentioned Georgia. What's better than Tbilisi in the summertime, right? But and you can still cross the border in a car, even though there isn't a midnight train to Georgia. But that isn't just even though there's no visa requirement for Georgia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and other places, right? That Kurdistan, no, Azerbaijan, no, um, Armenia. There are places you can travel without a visa, but you got to get out. And the border guards now, because of the desertion rate, are keeping a watchful eye, and that's only going to dial up. What the scuttlebutt, the as yet unproven but sounds like a Voda kind of thing, is that he's under the guise of modernizing. This sound very Trump-like, and there's so many times when we say the thing that Putin is doing sounds just like what Trump is doing now. Big surprise when you turn it on its head and you realize that Project 2025 and Russell Vogt and Stephen Miller, that entire program was developed by Putin, tested and refined in Hungary, and delivered to the United States. And in fact, many members of Heritage and other senior leaders from the United States went to study the program in Hungary under Viktor Orban. So there are very few tricks to the trade when it comes to implementing Project 2025. It was a proven theory. Now, you say, yeah, well, Victor lost. Sure. And as I've said before, Putin's lost. Putin lost the 2020 US election. But did he cry? Did he piss and moan? Did he bitch? Did he have a grievance? Did he have a temper tantrum? Did he throw a loaded Big Mac with extra special sauce against the dining room in the residence? No. He reloaded, reviewed the strategy, moved the tactics around to achieve the new revised strategy, and pressed forward because that's the kind of professional he is. He's not bitter. He's not angry. He's not he's not safe. He's not pleasant. He kills people. But I mean, as far as uh, a strategist, he is unparalleled in these things. So the scuttlebutt is that he is going to call up about between 300,000 and 400,000 reservists in after our Labor Day, right, for a kind of a fall offensive. I mean, it's delightful there, and if you're in the war, it's not delightful. But, if you thought about, battlefield conditions of decades ago, you're like, "Wow." In both Ukraine and in Moscow, you've got, what, 16 hours of daylight at this time of year, right? It's Moscow right now is, you start getting, dawn at what, 3:55 and dusk around, 9 PM. So you got a full day to go out there and do your thing. But of course, drones don't really care too much about daylight. They don't care a lot about, obviously, adverse weather conditions can affect drones, right? Just as they can, uh, aeronautics and other contexts. But yeah, it's he is he is implementing quietly because he doesn't want it to appear like desperation, because that sends a message that is already ringing through various levels of Russian society, is that this isn't going well, that this military operation is not going well in Ukraine, and why are we still doing this? And we're losing power. We're seeing smoke from Ukrainian drones that blow up our fuel depots. And now we have to ration gas because they're blowing up all the fuel depot. In what used to be Ukraine, then and now is settled largely from by Russians. Maybe people were thinking about going to the beach. It was, Yalta, for instance, where there was a big conference with past world leaders, and it's a beautiful summer resort kind of place. Not as much fun with missiles flying overhead. So Ukraine has been forced by circumstances to essentially attack their own country, part part that Russia has captured and claimed as its own. But much like Donbass, there are going to be people left behind that are too old, too poor to move along. So imagine Mr. Zelensky having to make that desperate decision. You know, Like, Zelensky just working with a fiction here. But imagine if he and his family used to enjoy seaside getaways in the summer in uh, in Ukraine, and now he has to bomb Yalta, right? One of the more popular or famous resorts in Crimea, which is now under Russian control. But for how much longer? The problem with retaking Crimea is that it would require so many, you know, using drones to kill oncoming troops is one thing. Using drones like uh, like dominant air power to take and hold territory is another thing entirely, because you really need that what seems like a trite expression of boots on the ground. It has to be there. It has to be that way. And until we have Elon's robots running all over the place, there were the Chinese dog military robots that we've seen very recently, which are eerie and kind of troubling. But rather have them on my side. Yeah. So desperate times. Zelensky. There's also been a rumor floated out there whether this is some sort of a psychological warfare measure, that somebody floated the information that Zelensky is considering, at such time as they can hold elections again in Ukraine, that he won't stand for election again. You know, what does that gain him? You say, I'm absolutely, they've had some corruption problems too. So my argument would be that's the right message, saying, I am here and I am yours, and I'm not retiring. I'm serving out my entire term as long as it takes to fulfill my promise to you to get the Russians out. But at such time as new elections are called, I may choose to do something else because I'm a young guy and I have a young family. And maybe it's time for some fresh ideas. And that's humility. That's whether that's just an act or it's actually true. That level of humility will play really well to the families of Ukraine that have sacrificed so much. That this guy, this is that Zelensky is not turning into another autocrat, right? He's holding on to democratic values. He's protecting us to the best of his ability. He's going to stay in the fight, head to head with Putin, as assassins are trying to take him out every single day, just as they're trying to do with Putin. And this brave, wonderful man that we all celebrate is having enough humility to say, I've been at this for X years. It's six coming up at some point, right? That at some point, maybe you want the choice, my dear people, who I love very much, to have your vote, your franchise count. And if you demand, then I'll stand for election. But I'm not going to make it like a fait accompli. I'm going to allow other candidates. I'm going to debate other candidates and allow you, as our countrymen that have sacrificed so much, your sons and daughters and babies that have been killed by Russians that attack civilian targets on purpose. You're going to be able to ask questions of your leaders and then make an informed decision at that time, 1 year and 6 months from now when we have the freedom to have new elections. So, yeah. In any case, it's it is. I do not envy. I'm very happy being. I was going to say a young man in the U. I was hungry. I was hungry. I'm always hungry. I was happy to be a young man in the United States. I am grateful that I'm not a young man currently facing that sort of uh, crisis of conscience, a dilemma where what about two friends of mine right next door? Their number came up in the draft and they're going to fight in Ukraine, right? And then mine comes up a week later. I've got a wife, I've got kids, I'm 25, I'm a I'm a data security expert and highly sought after in the West for my talents as a tech guy, but I love my country, right? So you got to make that decision with your wife and your family. But oftentimes, especially if it's your first deployment, then you got to say go because it's a war that is won and won and lost on the field by people maybe with your skill set, you want the MIT guys. You don't need the captain of the football team who is brave enough to run towards gunfire or a drone. You want the tech guy that can countermand new Russian innovations and figure out a workaround and a way to put a missile in an uncomfortable position on Vladimir Putin's anatomy. Right. So, in any case, thank you, and we'll keep an eye on that. I'll be watching for announcements. Of course, in Russia, they don't just take out an ad in the New York Times and say we're instituting the draft because morale would be tough, not just for the soldiers, but for the country as a whole. So he'll continue with this ruse of modernizing their systems and calling in people into local offices to present new identification and take new pictures, and then some of them will be shipped immediately to the front. So, because that's the way Voda likes to do it, direct control, right? Yeah, thank you. I'm going to slide around here, turn this off without doing any damage, and say thank you and wish you a beautiful evening. We'll see you tomorrow, which is Thursday, so it's Corrupt Connections. I wonder if I can figure out anything to talk about. Funny, right? Yeah. Enjoy. Maybe tomorrow might be tungsten. So we'll talk. Thank you. Restack, retweet, subscribe, do something. Thank you.